Robert Fleischer, the Usher. This is from the Book of Usher. And Robert, you are amazingly the best watercolor artist in the world that I know of. And I know a lot about them. I've even had my house painted, but not by you. I had my house painted in watercolor. Don't look at me. Look at the camera. What's about your life, Robert?
Okay.
Mr. Modest Usher. Now, here's the story. We want to document this because there's a book that's going to be called The House of Usher. No, the what?
The Book of Usher.
Yeah, look at the camera. Don't look at me. All right. The Book of Usher is coming out, right?
Okay.
And the Book of Usher is your life story. Also, you're going to have to expose a lot of people in this story, like the Carnegie Hall motley crew of world-class musicians. Now, as you have grown into the job of the usher, let's start at the beginning. You were a guy who lived in a one-studio apartment walk-up in New York City, and you took a job as an usher at Carnegie Hall, which was part-time?
It was considered part-time. My friend and also painter Jenny Curry had been working at Carnegie Hall supporting her creative freedom for 8 years before I got there, before I met her, and she convinced me to apply because she said, I work in my studio all day and then I go into Carnegie at night. It's a union job. There are major medical benefits involved. So the health care was a very important part of it. And so she said, put my name on your application. And I did, and they hired me. And 9 months after they hired me, they made me a supervisor. And for the 19 years I was there, I was a supervisor, a captain. I was a captain of the second tier, private boxes, for about a year, but for about a season. And then they moved me down to the orchestra level and trained me to work backstage and also in the main theater, but also in the recital hall. So I was wearing all the hats that were available. When they needed extra hand in the backstage, they put me back there. When somebody back there was out for the night, they would put me back there. But for the most part, I was in charge of the orchestra level for, I would say, 16 or 17 years of my 20 years there. And sometimes I'd help out the head usher in running the whole house and basically, made sure that the concert remained quiet during the music and kept it fun. It was supposed to be fun, and that's why I think management made me a supervisor, made me a captain, because I had diplomatic skills, could sort out problems without commotion, and kept it fun. And for the staff, night after night, it was 7 days a week, 2 shows on Saturday, 2 shows on Sunday, and back at it on Monday through Friday, and for 10 months out of the year. July and August, they would do major building repairs, and then we were back in September. And I had the opportunity to meet some of the finest people of our time, not just performers, but people who loved the music and would come to all the different series, concert, orchestra series, soloist series, opera series. Then there were the specialty, the independent producers that would produce the rainforest concerts like that Sting and his wife Trudy produced for 10 years. Every April we would do a benefit for the rainforest, and it was Sting, Elton John, James Taylor, and Billy Joel for 10 years. They were the staples, and then they would have guest artists. Each year was different. One year it was Madonna, another year it was Motown. When George Harrison passed away, the opening half was a tribute to George Harrison with Eric Clapton and all of his good friends. Olivia and Danny were in the house. And then intermission, the second half of that show was a Motown extravaganza with all the great Motown greats. And that turned into a party. That was a great concert that evening.
That's another hat you wore, a party hat.
That was a great, it was different every night.
Well, so let's talk about the parquet level. They were having problems with that, right?
Well, before I got down there, there was a captain of the parquet that was more of a tyrant. He had it was just an usher's job, but people still would have power trips. And he would humiliate the staff and belittle them and try to bully them into doing what needed to be done. And one night during a black tie event with Isaac Stern in the audience, everybody in tuxedos, there was commotion down there. The captain didn't handle it properly. He left a couple standing in the aisle. He walked away. It turned out it was the chairman of the board of Carnegie Hall, whose day job was president of the World Bank, James D. Wolfenson, and his wife Elaine, who became friends of mine. When that happened, when that embarrassment happened in front of the entire theater, everybody was seated, ready to go. The maestro was in the wings, waiting to walk on stage, and it was a terrible moment. And the next day, my boss, the head usher, told me, management called him, the executive director called him and said, we want Robert to take over the parquet. And I walked into work that day, and Joe Reed, the head usher, put his arm around me like Lyndon Johnson did with George Wallace to desegregate the schools, and he said, Bobo, you got to take over the parquet. I said, no, Joe, not the parquet.
That's a demotion, right?
It was considered the penitentiary because it was close to the house manager's office, so all the bad apples were down there, so they could keep an eye on them and fire them if they misbehaved or did something wrong. So he said, I'm sorry, Bobo, but you got to do this because the executive director called me, Judith Aaron. She was an amazing woman. She called him at work during his day job, which was he ran the 28th precinct in Harlem for the police department in the civilian capacity. And Joe said they never called him during the day at work. And this came from the top. They wanted me to take over the parquet. And I said, okay, I'll do it on one condition. You got to take 2 of these people off the floor. I can't work with them. They're so bad. I can't work with them.
And you need an AKG.
And I need an AK-47. No.
Yeah, is that what it is?
No, nonviolence. So he did that. He removed these 2 bad apples off the floor. And within a couple of weeks, I had management coming down to me, telling me what a great job I was doing. Basically, all I was doing was keeping it quiet and telling the staff that democracy reigned. They could roam the floor, take care of the people, have fun, talk to the people. If they needed help, ask, do you need help? I mean, just the simplest, basic, just simple kindness.
Well, you also took people out to their cars when there was a snowstorm.
If there was somebody that needed extra help, I took the opportunity to help people. I was getting paid to be there to help people, and a lot of the staff were great. I would say out of the 60 people on the Usher's corps, 1/3 was deadwood because they were exhausted from their day jobs. They would get in and they'd fall asleep. 1/3 was adequate, would get the job done, and 1/3 were really good workers. And the 1/3 that were really good workers got us through the night, every night. And it wasn't soon after I took over the orchestra level that people were requesting from the head usher to be transferred down to the orchestra level because they heard through the grapevine in our locker room that we were having fun down there. We were talking to the people. We were helping Jeff Bridges to a seat.
You were social networking.
We were just having fun with Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward, and they were all down there. They had series. They were coming. Joanne loved all this, opera, the classical, the soloists, the piano concertos.
And Charles Osgood, who does the Sunday morning show on CBS for years.
For years, he and Jean, his wife, lived right across the street from Carnegie Hall, and they were always there. So one day when I sorted out a problem in the second row, it was again a black tie event. My staff couldn't sort out a duplicate ticket situation, so I went down there, and it was again James Wolfenson and his wife who were standing in the aisle in formal dress, and the people that were sitting in their seats weren't getting out. They bought their seats. They had a box office ticket. So I simply went down there and said, you know, you kind of won the lottery, because it's not often the computer kicks out a duplicate ticket. However, the people standing in the aisle, this is their series, this is their subscription, but because you have a box office ticket, I can get you into the presidential suite. Not everybody gets to sit in the presidential suite. And if you come with me, I'll get you into, since 1891, when the theater opened, every president from then until now has sat in those seats, and you can sit in those seats tonight. And they got right up out of their seats, and I took them out without any commotion. And as I walked up the aisle, Charlie Osgood and Charlie went like this. What did you do? What did you say to them? How did you get that? You know, he's a reporter. He's curious. So I went back to him at intermission, and I told him what I said, you know, because getting people to move could be hard. But if you're diplomatic and you do it with a smile and positivity and make it seem like it's still a good time. Remember, this is Carnegie Hall. You're supposed to have a good time. You've had dinner. Nobody's hungry. You're going to listen to some world-class music. Why not sit in the presidential box?
Why don't you do this in Washington, D.C., where they have across the aisle?
Right.
Would you handle both sides of the aisle?
I was a political science major in college at Western Michigan, and I wanted to be a statesman. I wanted to do that.
You were going to do the painting for the President Clinton.
Well, I was placed under consideration for the Clintons' White House portraits.
So your painting is really important, but you playing it down, because you were the usher. And while you were the usher, you were the best usher in the world. You became the usher.
I did.
Yeah.
I didn't intend to, but it was always to support the creative freedom. So I could paint during the day and go in at night, be rejuvenated with great music. I had no idea of the people I would end up meeting.
Don't they hire mostly musicians?
They did when I got there. There were a lot of musicians, but musicians have gigs at night, and they would call out sick, or they would sign out.
And that's a 7-day-a-week job.
7 days a week. And you could take, after the union negotiated a time where if you worked 5 shows in a row, you could take a night off. So that was something that a lot of people used.
And you were a union guy.
We were all union. I worked 7 days a week because I was a supervisor, and it's not that hard. It's like it was a 4-hour gig at night from 7 until 11. If the concert was over at 10, we would get paid until 11, but we'd get to go home early. It was a joy to work at a place like Carnegie Hall.
And you made paintings, and you did one with the inimitable what?
Well, I was assigned to work with Leonard Bernstein,
right,
with the Vienna Philharmonic.
Right.
And what an amazing story that is, because
well, that's a concert that never took place.
Well, no, the painting I did was a concert that never took place, but he performed with the Vienna Philharmonic, and immediately upon meeting me, because the ladies that usually would work with him could not that night. They had something else to do, so they put me in charge. And Lenny we called him Lenny. He was the most curious person. If you met him for 10 minutes, it was 10 minutes you would never forget. He was totally invested in finding out who you were, what made you tick. He would grab onto you. He was touchy-feely in a good way, and he was genuine in everything he said. He was an amazingly interesting guy. Unfortunately, he was a smoker, chain smoker. His assistant would light up a new cigarette when the other one was down to the filter, and he would get handed a new cigarette. So it was truly a chain smoker. And I remember hearing him tell a story about when he was in his late 20s, his doctor told him, if you don't stop this, you're going to be dead soon. And I remember him telling his doctor, or hearing the story of him telling his doctor when he was in his 70s, look, I'm still here, aren't I? And I'm still smoking. But it eventually, the cancer
him, yeah.
eventually got
All
to
right, so
him.
he did West Side Story with Stephen Sondheim doing the lyrics.
Right.
And now that's coming around again in motion picture with Spielberg directing it, putting the project together with some wonderful actors. Someone who played Maria last time in the film itself, the original film. And that's, what's her name? Maria. I keep wanting to say Maria because that's what I know her as. Rita Moreno.
Rita Moreno, right,
Yeah.
right.
And she now is in this film, but as an older person.
Right. I've met Marino, and she is a class act. She sat in the back of the orchestra, in the back of the parquet, in the usher's chair with us one night, because she had a little bit of a cold, a little sniffle, and she didn't want to disturb anybody around her. This was, in the 90s.
Well, David Randolph was that way. He had a 150 voice choir, and he would never shake hands. He would use his elbow, and he because he didn't want to catch cold and pass it on. He was in his 90s, and he conducted the Saint Cecilia Chorus and Orchestra. Saint Cecilia is the patron saint of music, and also he is Jewish, and he conducted Handel's Messiah 175 times in the Guinness Book of Records.
Yes,
and he loved you.
Well, we hit it off because he was very down to earth, hated being called maestro.
And his wife sat in the audience.
Mildred, yeah. But we became friends. I did a pencil drawing of David Randolph for a benefit to sell. I gave it to them to sell and to help raise money for the St. Cecilia Choir. And it was very successful. Everybody in the choir bought one, and people and family members, they did very well with it. And then I told him, I said, David, you've got a great radio voice. He had this deep pear voice. And he said, well, he did public radio for years. I said, one of my best friends is Joey Reynolds. He's on WOR, and I got to get you on his radio show. And he was initially afraid that you were going to be a shock jock.
Well, yeah, he didn't want to go from Isaac Stern to Howard Stern.
Right, and he was a little bit concerned because he said, I only know classical music. I don't know anything else. I said, Joey is very kind, very interested. You'll be fine. I literally had to bring him myself, kicking and screaming, and then he became a regular because after that first night of being on your show, he loved it. He loved it, and he became a regular on your show on WOR, and he's a night person anyway, so he was up all night, and the ticket sales went up. The ticket sales tripled after being on your show, and as a result, he invited you and me and Sid Bernstein up on stage during an afternoon rehearsal, and we sat right in there with the orchestra listening to this rehearsal on the stage at Carnegie Hall until the stagehands saw us up there and said, excuse me, Bobo, but you guys got to leave the stage.
You're not supposed to do that.
You're not supposed to be up
unless
here.
you're performing.
Unless you're performing. So we left the stage.
Yeah.
But it was at the invitation of the maestro, of David Randolph. So,
there's another part to the story. I mean, years later, 100-year anniversary of Carnegie Hall, 100 years of never, ever having any violations like that,
right.
Of no interruptions, and no one ever took and introduced an usher as
well,
being
that was after 20 years of being an usher. I was leaving to come down to Florida to paint full time, and
he put a microphone on the
stage,
center stage.
He went to house management and said, I want to honor Robert on his 20 years at Carnegie. And they gave him permission. The stagehands and I were really tight because I looked out for anybody videotaping or audio taping. And so I had the back of the stagehands, and they had my back. And they prevented some hostility towards me a couple of times when people didn't want to leave the theater. About 6 or 7 of them would step up to the curtain of the stage and say, Bob, are you all right? And with them standing there, the people would leave the theater, and so we had each other's back. So they were all 4 putting a microphone out there. It was my second from last night, December 6th, 2006. After the first half, before the second half started, David Randolph called me up on stage to take a bow. He gave this incredible introduction told the audience that I was leaving to pursue my art full time, and
you were the usher.
and I was the usher, the first usher in the 116-year history at that time, to be called up on stage to take a bow for being an usher.
So there you go. So that's why you are the usher.
And Charles Osgood and his wife were in the audience that night, and later told me that they were in the audience that night, and they were so happy for me. I didn't take the microphone. I didn't have anything to say to the audience. I just took a bow and gave David a hug, which he didn't really appreciate because he only did elbows. He never,
he didn't
touching, no touching.
150 voice choir.
Right, but that was funny. He hugged me back, and Mildred was in the audience, and I mean, it was great. They were so great. And then, I had these letters that were written because I never took tips for helping people who needed help. To get a cab after the show, I would stay late. I'd be the last person to leave.
And Isaac Stern knew about you. He knew all about you.
And
he took that painting of you with Leonard Bernstein conducting the Russian orchestra with that concert that never took place.
Right.
And you put in the audience of on the orchestra the faces of all of your friends
and family
and famous people.
And Isaac Stern was in the first tier with Judith Aaron, the executive director, and James Wolfenson, chairman of the board. I put everybody I could think of in the audience because as I was working on this painting, at first I just started filling in the seats with people, but they all started to look the same. So I realized I had to think of real people in my mind's eye, and that's how I got to do my mom and dad and my sister and my brother-in-law and all the people that I knew, my cousins. And then it became friends, and then it became Carnegie people.
And James Lipton was your
James
cousin.
Lipton, my cousin, and his wife
You put me in there with my accordion?
Yeah, well, no, you're playing a viola. I put you in the orchestra.
Thank you.
And I put a couple of other, my Aunt Marion, who's a piano teacher, she's playing a viola. So I put some people that I know in the orchestra, just because it was about an orchestra at Carnegie Hall.
So what happened? Isaac Stern saw the painting.
They put it in we had posters made. I had posters made. A patron of mine funded the creation of the posters. They put it in the gift shop, and the gift shop sold these posters for years. They ended up all over the world. I heard about them ending up in China, really, truly all over the world. And people would come to me in the back of the parquet and want me to autograph the poster of the orchestra painting, which I would do discreetly because I was still working and I didn't want to, confuse the issue.
Well, there's in hospitality, as they teach about hospitality in the various schools, there's the back of the house and the front of the house. Mm-hmm. You can choose which side you want. You want to either be in the kitchen or you want to be out there and be hospitable. You seem to have worked both sides of the aisle. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, it did work out that way. It just happened because the people who worked at Carnegie Hall and the patrons of Carnegie Hall who got to know me, not just watching me solve problems without commotion and resolve problems without commotion, would watch it happen. And I became friends with Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward because they had a ticket snafu one night, and I had to split up their daughters, and Joanne was in the first tier, Paul and one of his daughters was in the parquet, and I was running back and forth. And after that, we were friends. Same with Martin Sheen and Janet Sheen. Janet is a painter, Martin, the West Wing president. I just received a handwritten note from Martin and Janet just yesterday.
He wants to buy back the friendship.
No, it's funny.
And you tried to get Paul McCartney to go back to the Beatles.
Well, actually, Paul put his arm around me just within a minute of my meeting him. He came up to me with his tickets, and I took him to his seat, and I showed him a color Xerox of my guitar, which was a Hofner look-alike.
Well, he used to be in the back at the Iridium when I was there with Les Paul every Monday night, and I'd look and Paul would slip in.
You're right, after the show started.
And so what you did was you created a guitar from Wood.
from the
From a
lumber
tree.
yard. Yeah. It was a square block of wood, and I carved it. Took 2 years.
Which is Les Paul's first guitar was called
The log.
The log.
Well, this was a block of wood that I carved out like a Hofner, like the violin shape.
And it actually plays.
Oh, it's 20 some years old now, and it's solid body. And when I showed Paul this thing, he went straight up, man. It's great. He asked
But how
me a
about
bunch.
Les Paul?
And then I had Les Paul sign it, and picture of me with Les signing, my guitar. But I met Paul McCartney a few times, and James Taylor, and so many Yo-Yo Ma. All these people were
Well,
great
you met
people.
everybody.
I did it, and Marian Anderson.
Sid Bernstein, who was in the concert where we were on the stage with David Randolph, it should be said that he was the guy who booked the talent there at Carnegie Hall, and he created the concert with Tony Bennett and Count Basie, which brought him back, gave him a comeback. And this week, when West Side Story comes out, that Stephen Sondheim died, unfortunately, and Leonard Bernstein's gone. But this is their project. This is their show.
Well, I have to say that in Sid, you reminded me of another event. I was assigned backstage to work with Tony Bennett. He did a 5-night in a row, Monday through, I might have been Tuesday through Saturday, 5 nights in a row of Tony Bennett at Carnegie Hall in his prime, and we talked backstage mostly about painting, because he is a great painter. And even though I'm a frustrated musician, most musicians call themselves frustrated musicians. Some of these, the greats. Billy Joel, when I said to Billy Joel, yeah, I'm a frustrated musician, he said, so am I. But Tony Bennett was fantastic. What a great guy.
Yeah.
What a great guy. I mean, the bigger they were, the bigger they are, the nicer they seem to be.
Well, his daughter Antonia did my theme song. Did you know that? She studied in Italy, and that's how I met him.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought the Four Seasons, Frankie
Well,
Valli.
that's one of my songs.
Yeah,
I have many theme songs that have many lives,
Right, yes, you do.
And you were a pallbearer, you had...
Please, not yet.
Oh, no. All right, so there we go.
So,
You're the usher.
Yeah, there's just so many stories.
We open with the painting at Carnegie Hall, and we close with you being introduced on stage.
And I have to say that in doing the orchestra painting, because the stagehands and I were like this, we were really tight, they invited me to come to Carnegie Hall in the summertime when it was closed to do the major building repairs, to draw the gilded design, the beautiful designs, architectural intricacies of the backstage wall, and all the gilding and gold leaf, reliefs. And so I was on stage doing these pencil drawings of this detail from the stage.
Where are they? Do you have them?
I still have them.
Well, put them in your book.
And what I did is I used those pencil drawings to fill in the detail in the painting, so that the back wall of the stage level and the first tier architecture is from my eye to the pencil.
Well, the best drawing you ever did was when you drew a salary.
Oh, but that helped the creative freedom. Plus, being union, I got to do some extra jobs, like working backstage was a little bit more money. But the real benefit was meeting and working with people like Yo-Yo Ma and Manny Axe, doing a concert, the two of them. I mean, Isaac Stern did many concerts and albums with Manny and Yo-Yo. But one day I'm working with Manny, and Yo sold out, and we can't get him out of the dressing room. And it's like 10 after 8, quarter after 8. The house is dark, people are waiting, and house managers are calling me on the little walkie-talkie saying, Robert, can you bring him down? So I knock on the Maestro Suite door, and they're rehearsing. They're still rehearsing. And I said, guys, it's quarter after 8, any time now. And so they came out laughing and joking, not a care in the world, and not any stress at all. Get him down to the stage level, waiting for the stagehand to open up the stage door to let them out on stage. He opens up the door, And just before they walk out, Yo tweaks Manny's right or left butt and crunches it just as the door is swung open, and Manny went straight up in the air, about that far up in the air, and then they walked right out on stage to applause and you know what I mean? Those are the things you don't see.
Well, yeah, because you don't want anyone to know that the door hit you in the ass on the way out.
That's right. And also with the orchestra painting, once I got everybody out on stage, I could sit backstage and do pencil drawings of the harps. Every harp is different, and the design on the instrument is different. And I would do these intricate pencil drawings of the detail carved into this wood, and was able to transpose those pencil drawings into the painting. Also, the way the triangle player would hold the triangle, the way instruments were held and played. I had an up-close personal experience with that backstage, as well as my grandfather being in the Detroit Symphony when I was growing up.
And now you have just done first responders. We all wear masks.
Okay.
I went to a concert of Handel's Messiah this week, and they all wore masks.
Right.
I wasn't real big on that, but you said it's okay.
Yeah, no, when the COVID thing hit, I and my friends and patrons, Bill and Sandy Nicholson, started a thing called nurseheroes.org, and you can still go to that, nurseheroes.org. And I was part of a online gallery and fundraiser for art, for visual art, but they also put together a nurseheroes.org concert that was, Katy Perry was host, Stevie Wonder was part of it, all the A-list musicians and performers. And they just a couple weeks ago, they had another event in New York City with some other performers, and they're continuing to fundraise to help the docs and nurses around the country. And I'm friends with the director of ICU at Sinai Hospital here in Miami, and did a pencil drawing of him and 2 ICU nurses that was part of the nurseheroes.org fundraiser.
Are you an A-list artist?
I'm just trying to do the best I can.
That's it. We love the USHER.
Yeah, the USHER was just a way of funding the creative freedom. The freedom was always the main goal. I never wanted to paint unless I could paint and say what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it.
Well, I did it the hard way. I had 40 jobs and I kept getting fired.
But you kept getting jobs, and you've had 40 jobs, and you're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and you know a ton of people, and you still got it. You still are sharp as a knife. You're still one of the sharpest knives in the drawer, and the brightest bulbs in the ceiling. So yeah, you still got it going on, Joey.
Well, where's that A-list?
What? It's A-list, not E-list. A-list. Anyway.
Robert Fleischer, the USHER from the Book of USHER.